And good morning. So good to see each one of you this morning, especially for those who are visiting. We always ask and extend as a brief invitation to our visitors if you'll just remain briefly after services so we can at least get to know you a little bit better and introduce ourselves to you. I know it's also Thanksgiving week, and so I know that you'll have family, maybe in a lot of get-togethers coming up this week, and we're very thankful for that. As Weldon already mentioned, very thankful to have not only Brad and LaDonna with us, which I know to get both of them here is always encouraging, especially at one time, and for Leroy and Pat. And I know that, speak for the congregation, knowing what all you've struggled through just to get you here. We're so excited to see you here. I know after Leroy with about 4 months of not really knowing what was going on, and to get another consultation to find out something to help alleviate that was an answer to prayer. So we're glad to see you. A grandson wanted to make his grandfather a cup of coffee, a special cup of coffee that he said would be the world's best. And so the grandfather, with some hesitation in that anticipation, decided to drink whether it would be very strong or very weak, to the bitter end. Nearing the bottom of the cup, though, revealed 3 little army men at the bottom of the cup. So inquisitive, the grandfather asked the grandson why the army men were there. So that's why it makes it so special, because the best part of waking up is soldiers in your cup. So I heard that and I had to pass that along. I'm not a very good joke teller, but that was special enough for me to remember. So blessings out of the mouths of babes for little kids that may get something and hear it just a little bit wrong, and we've all been there and have appreciated that. How many times do you think you've heard the passage found in John 8:32, which says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free"? I suppose numerous times, probably not enough to count, hundreds of times I suppose we've heard that over the years. How many even more non-believers have quoted that? People that you don't even realize would even dare to don the door of a church. Maybe just people in general that just use that as a connotation and a quotation. Coming across with the notion that it's all in the facts. It's just all in the knowing. That just by knowing, this knowledge of the truth will just come and set us free. But you know what's most interesting about this quote that gets lost through over time, and in this passage that is unfortunately gets the most misused? To really see what Jesus was saying, and what we in turn are to share with folks, that we should actually start back in verse 31. So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed in him, "If you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." I want us to notice a couple of things in verse 31 before we get to the famous verse 32. Let's notice, too, that he was talking to who? To those Jews who had believed him. Now, that's very interesting, because Jesus always had a crowd of people, of non-believers and skeptics, and those who are scoffing, those who are trying to entrap him, those who are really trying to catch him in like maybe something they could call back on later. But this wasn't the case. Kind of said is what Tim used in this morning's class about preaching in the choir. These are the people that actually really wanted to believe. They were already interested in following him, and would already do what he would say, to do what he said. Not those who are looking to entrap him. We should also point out that the word "and" is something that we all know, and your English teacher will tell you, is a conjunction. It means we're adding 2 things, and. It's this and that. The 2 go together. And we've separated verse 32 all by itself, even though there is the word "and," which is a conjunction. It adds 2 things and joins concept, a verse, and it joins these 2 together. And in this case, 2 ideas that are joined together. So what were those ideas that are joined here? The full quote is, if you continue in my word. Continuing in what we've been talking about, meaning abide in. Do what I say. Do what I ask you to do. Why do you think the question is going to be posed in the very end, in the day of judgment, when the Lord will even ask, why call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things that I say? That's his question. His question, the people that said they were followers all along, if you abide in my word, abiding, do what I say, do what I ask you to, and follow what it says, then, if I do that, here's the prescribed notion, there's the if I do that, then you are truly a follower. You're truly a disciple of mine. That bears out what the true litmus test is. One can say they believe all day long. But if they never showed it, did they really believe it? Was it real? James, the brother of Jesus, pointed that out over in James chapter 2, verses 14 and 17, where it says, what use is it, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but has no works? Can that faith save him? We could preach on that verse alone for the rest of the time, which we won't. But that's an interest. I want that to set that in. Maybe you circle it and maybe reread that and contemplate that later on your own. James asks, can that faith save a person that just says it all day long and doesn't do any bit of it? We'll read on. Verse 15, he gives an example that we can kind of live out. If a brother or sister is without clothing or in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and be filled. See, it just sounds right. It sounds nice. But you didn't lift a finger to actually help in the cause? That's really the question. And then you do not give them what is necessary for their body? What use is it? Why are you even going there? Playing it. Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. And yet I can walk out here and hear testimonies, all kinds of all day long of faith this and faith this, and all I have to believe is faith and believe and faith and knowledge of that, and then not do anything about it. And James puts it to the test. Can that faith save that person? The brother of Jesus asked that. We'll get back to that in a minute. Faith by itself, James says this. And then adding in verse 14, if someone, anyone, we can go outside and find this. If anyone says, I have faith. Have you ever met a person like that? They will tell you, I have faith. I love God. I read my Bible. I pray. I even go to church. But I never do anything of what it says or tells me to do. I guess God just have to deal with it, I guess. Grace and extended grace for something that is not allowed. Never see them live it out. Not once. James asks, can that faith, whatever lip service of what that is, will it save them? One you can talk about all day long. Can that faith save them? The answer is no. And the reason it's no is they didn't really believe it enough to live it out. That's called a conviction. You know, you can say one thing and do another. We know what that's called. It's called a hypocrite. I just read about it. Hearers only. Just information. And just by that truth alone is supposed to set us free. We've just taken 32 and we've isolated it and not used. If you are truly if you abide my own word and you're living in that word and you keep on and you continue on, then you're truly a disciple of mine. And by that, then you'll know the truth and all the truths that Jesus and all the prophets and everything else said. All of that stuff will come together and you will be set free, which we'll get to in a minute. But this whole information thing, this knowing thing, the old TV program said it well with Dragnet with Detective Joe Friday, who asked, just the facts, ma'am, was good enough for a detective series. It was good enough in their minds, but not so with Christianity. It's not just in the knowing as in knowledge. It gets more intimate. It's worth noting that the word know, to know God, describe the know, is what I've used as an illustration before, but I think it's very poignant to bring out. That is when Abraham knew Sarah. Not to get overly graphic, most of us are adults here. That's a very intimate relationship. It's a physical union between a husband and a wife. It's a togetherness that no one else can be a part of. It's not designed that way. But it is very intimate. It was just that alone, that union together that God ordained. It wasn't just the fact that Abraham knew there was a Sarah, that he knew her, that she was his wife, and that was factual knowledge. No, it goes one step further. And that's the same word that's used in our relationship with God about knowing God. Very intimate. We need to understand how intimate relationship we are to have with Jesus Christ. Not knowing that there was a Jesus and that he was here on earth and that, yeah, he was born of a virgin, then he died for our sins. All knowledgeable stuff. But that in itself not transforming unless we apply it. Because we can know about something all day long, but if we never put it to use, we know what it does. I can use it as illustrations each and every year. In January, I'll get back to the same notion, and maybe I'll get to that. We can know all we need to know to lose weight, and what does it do for us? Oh, the pounds just keep shedding off. I just said the doctor tells me to lose 50, and just with that truth alone, I've lost 50. We all laugh because the application part of that truth knowledge is where we fall often. Well, you need to exercise more. Well, I know everything there is to know about exercising. I've got books. I've got a treadmill at home. I've got everything I could tell you about how you need to be fit, the perfect diet for it. I have that knowledge. But you don't apply it. What good is it? Are you the guru that's going to be hosted at the next convention and say, we got to have this guy come and tell us all we need to know about this? Oh, and by the way, he didn't do anything about it. You know, that's why Dr. Spock was eventually condemned after a while. He never lived through it. All this baby advice and children advice. You didn't have kids? I mean, how often would you want to approach someone that wants to give you parenting advice that don't have children? No practical information? Well, I've read all the books there is to do about parenting. I know what's in these books. That's called book knowledge. We know about book smarts and street wisdom. We know there's a difference with that. One is very with application. The other one is just knowledgeable information. And that's where we don't need to be stuck with. But is whatever we do anything about, it's in the action of what we've accomplished. What good is it? But if we see it and we still continue to see it, if we're a follower, a true follower, and after abiding and doing his word, not just knowing it, but truly living it out, then you will know the truth, and the truth about the life that he now wants us to have in Christ Jesus. Because then we don't even become our own. We've even lost our identity. And some people may have a problem with that because I'm very prideful. I like my name. I like my reputation. I like all that. It says, you're hidden in Christ. The whole purpose is not to reflect your glory. That's why I appreciate Tim and through all of his class, all the time, all in his prayers and everything else that he's talking about is will this bring glory to God? We're just the moon. We're the reflection. The sun comes down and it reflects. That's what we are. Not within ourselves, but some people can struggle with that, and I understand that. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set us free if we carry it out. Pretty simple procedure. But then he says that we will be set free. Jesus goes on to clarify from what? Look at verse 33 as it points out. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never yet been enslaved to anyone. It's kind of inquisitive. They were enslaved all kinds of things throughout times. How we forget. You don't remember the Egyptians. You don't remember all that. But anyway, we're going to go back to that anyway. We'll just take them at their word. We're Abraham's descendants, and we have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say we will become free? It's kind of the same thing about the drinking water, living water. You know, this is the same well, Jacob's well we've been drinking out of. Is this any, and I'm never going to thirst again. We're missing the point. I must be born again. How can I go back into my mother's womb? All those little poignant things we go back to. Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone, not a select group. Well, okay, I know there are some big sinners out this door. I mean, it's just everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. And that's why Jesus came, is to free us from slavery, to free from that bondage from ourselves, to free us from ourselves. Not let alone anybody else that can enslave us. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son does not remain forever. So if the son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I love that. So I'm not free of anything. If the son sets you free, if Jesus Christ has said that it's going to be done, it will happen. I know that you are of Abraham's descendants, yet you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. Guess who it had not abided in? So, well, we're of Moses. He says, well, no, you're not, because if you're of Moses, and we talked a little bit about that, about the prophets, about Moses being a prophet and spoke of Jesus. He says, if you knew Moses, you'd know me. Because if you knew exactly what he spoke of, you would know me. So you're really not of Moses, people, even though that's who you say that you are. So everyone who commits sin is the slave to sin. We don't like that word, especially in this nation, of slavery. Kind of want to turn our head and kind of let the chapters go by so we don't have to look at that. Maybe it's our descendants that were involved in that, and we have some relatives on both sides that may have been affected with it. And there was a great civil war over it to come through slavery. So that's not really a good image for us. But it is something beyond your control. And in simple forms as I can place it for us, and I know none of us like this because we like to be in the middle. You know, don't like to be on one side of something or another. You're either going to be a slave to sin. Factual is what this points out right here. That's a fact. You're either going to be a slave to sin or a slave to Christ. The ones that had to transcribe, the Bible didn't even like the word slave because of the connotations it brought up, so they changed it to a more softer, gentler word we call servant. Nothing wrong with that, but it takes away with what are you? You are either going to be a slave to righteousness, servant to righteousness, full willing, just you're like full willing to engage in sinful activities. It's still your choice. Still a choice, but that's really what we're going to end up in those two categories. And it's for us to understand that. And we do what our master says. That's why we can't serve both. It says we can't do that. You can deny this fact all day long, but in this life, those are the two options. You choose. And I choose to be a slave of righteousness, because where it will get me. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free. How does that happen? By following His word, doing really what it says. I may have to refrain from some of the things that I've done. I may have to, and the Bible uses it, lay aside. It's like taking off an old garment. But I heard this once, and it's kind of poignant for us to remember because we're all human. Even if we become a child of God, the old man seems to be in a closet. And I mean that because we kind of reserve it, because sometimes we want to put on the old man. Well, let me put on this old man for a little bit, and then I'll confess that and ask for forgiveness later. Because there are some things I don't want to give up. There are some things that I still want to go through or I want to act upon. Why Paul said this in Romans 7:7, I would not have come to know sin except through the law. That's what it's for. Speed limit's 55. I'm doing 60. Black and white tells me I'm a lawbreaker. Okay? The law came out and said, if you're outside of my will, then you're a lawbreaker. And that's why it says even though the law was good, it wasn't perfect. Because all it told me was I was a lawbreaker. It could do nothing to save me. There was no grace extended, nothing. It was just I was outside of the will. I was outside of the law. So Paul says, I would not have come to know sin except through the law, for I have not known about coveting if the law had not said, you shall not covet. But I love this. And Paul, in his, he's so poignant about it. He says, but sin taking opportunity through commandment produced in me coveting of every kind. It's kind of like, okay, now that you told me don't do this or I'm coveting, now I find myself coveting all the time. Well, now you're aware. Now, what are you going to do with that knowledge? That's the key. He says, I wouldn't know what covetousness was until the law came and God showed me. And after that, guess what? It's at a crossroads. I may have to do something about it. I find myself coveting all the time. What would he do about it? As most do, just accept it and go on. Whether I'm a failure or this is my attitude or this is the way it's going to be. Just accept me and take me as I am. And that's the great news about the good news is God will accept you and take you as you are, but loves you enough to just keep you there and lets you stay there. Because he wants something more for all of us. And that's why be transformed. And there's a transformation. There's a renewing, which we'll get to in a minute. But I find myself coveting all the time. What did he do about it? Did he accept and go on? Do we just go on coveting, say, accept me for who I am? Say, is that why grace was there? So I can just keep on sinning? Heaven forbid. May that never be, Paul says. The Bible says we have to actually put to death some things. Yeah, but it's in my nature. It's in my blood. That's kind of been passed down to the family. I'm a hot-head tempered guy, and so is my father, and so is his father, and that's just the way it's going to be. No. Sometimes we make it that way. We may have to lay aside some things. We may have to buffet our body and make it our slave. That's a great image, because this physical body is going to want to do everything that, and I think Weldon, I got this from Weldon many years ago. He says, our bodies are going to go back in the grave, and it knows it. It knows its futility. It knows where it's going. So guess what it's going to do? It's going to cater to everything here and now. It's the spirit that wages war within that says, no, but I'm going to live on. And I'm going to make you my slave. You are going to do what I want you to do. You are no longer in control. Now that is really making your body your slave. When it really wants what it wants. It's tired, you rest it. It's hungry, you feed it. You want to groom it. You want to take a shower. You want to do all that stuff. It's all catering to a physical realm. Just to get us here for a spiritual renewal here this morning. And that's why it's the key word there. Renew the mind. Transform. Renew again. Why do you think you have to be reminded so much? It's just not me. Your doctors will do it all the time you want. Do you ever get offended and say, you know what? You need to quit reminding me about these appointments because I'm tired of it. Oh, thank you. I got busy. I forgot. I have a 9 a.m. appointment tomorrow morning. And if you would never have called and left that at my voicemail, why do you think they do that? They have to get you there. But I've never seen anybody pound on the desk about getting mad about reminder calls. Oh, yeah, that's right. We get busy. We get distracted. We can take our eyes off things. Renew again and again. And maybe that's why you're here this morning, for a renewal. The truth will set us free from being enslaved, because it's not only the knowledge, but it's the acting upon it. Does one continue to recover from anything? And let's say it's just alcohol, by just knowing they don't need to drink. Do you think that's all they sit around in a circle and tell them, well, you don't need to drink? Yeah, I think I got that. I see the pain of that. I know that. I have the knowledge of that. I know that I should not partake in it, but I'm doing it. I have no control over it. They're being as honest as they can be. And that's what the Bible says. Anyone who sins is going to be a slave to sin. So don't think that I'm in control. It's the rest of us to say, you know what? I'm not in control. I don't have the power, and I'm going to give it over to God. It's God's strength. It's not mine. They already know that they shouldn't, but can't stop. They are a slave to it. So just the knowledge is not setting them free from anything. So let's not use that out of context. So the knowledge is not just enough. It's always in the action. Or in a recovering alcoholic, it's non-action on their part. They don't partake today. And that's all they can control. I love it. They take a whole model from the Bible and have perfected it. And it's we who are spiritual that have gotten away from what God has already implemented. Is these steps to recovery. It's daily. I'm going to get through today, and I'm not going to do it today. You can't promise a week from now that you're going to be good. Just like spiritually speaking, you can't speak spiritually 6 months from now when catastrophe hits. A year from now, my faith will withstand. It's just today. We're only built for today. Don't let your anger, when the sun goes down, take care of that for today. Today is the day of salvation. All of that. Tomorrow is the same thing. You wake up day after day, renewed, and that's why they count days of sobriety. Because they look back and they look at each day and it adds up. Why sobriety counts days past. Not I'm cured. They don't ever buy into that lie. Let's move on. It's one day at a time. Same for us. One day we wake up and we get renewed. Tomorrow, guess what? I'm going to have to get renewed again. I'm going to have to get reminded again. Tomorrow, really? I'm going to forget that? Just like your doctor's appointment. It's so easy. And we get renewed by his living word that's living out in our lives. So my question then, why aren't we good doers? Why do we like to talk it up a bunch? Post it on social media? Why do we and not do a lot of things in life? Because it's easier to talk about it than do it. I've heard that a lot of times. We'll have brainstorming ideas in a group function about what we can do, and this is a good idea, and let's do it. I say, okay, now, let's do it. Now, who's willing to do? Well, my schedule won't permit. I'm just an idea maker. I'm just here just putting out the factory of all these great things. Wonderful. We appreciate that. But it's all about the doing. That, I guess, is the million-dollar question for any of us. Where James encourages us, Paul does, Peter, the rest of the disciples, and Jesus says, if you keep abiding in my word, you are indeed my disciple. So the obvious to also point out that if we don't abide in his word, how would we be defined? Are you a follower? Are you a disciple, a true disciple? I mean, it's so plain, we can't really corner ourselves to kind of get out of the corner we backed ourselves in. Would he say that he knew me in the end? Because just like intimately knowing God, it's all in the knowing, both for us and for him. It's all about the relationship. It has since day one in the garden. But even after man was banished from the garden, God paved a way back through Jesus Christ. Didn't leave us there. Because he knew, foreknowing with all foreknowledge, before the foundations of the world, this plan was set in Ephesians 1, 4, and 6, which says, just as he chose us in him. Jesus was not an afterthought. Oh, plan B. Just as he chose us, he chose you, chose this plan in him before the foundation of the world, that we would be holy and blameless before him in love, he predestined us to adoption as sons through Jesus Christ to himself, according to the kind intention of his will, to the praise of the glory of his grace, which he freely bestowed on us in the beloved. But there is one thing more I want to add to help us abide in his word that may be helpful this morning and keep abiding in that word. Just to not read it, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I just those names," and I get so stumbled over some of those things. I don't understand a lot of that stuff, and it's just a negative thing on you. To help keep abiding, and that's the word if we use often enough, the Bible talks about it, is also a word that we don't use much because another organization has taken it over. It's called meditation. Meditation in the dictionary is also described as contemplation. In order to contemplate something, you're going to have to really mull that around. It's not just read John 3:16. It's not just read, it's to contemplation. It's thought, thinking, pondering, consideration, reflection, deliberation, concentration. All of those words, they're trying to give out what is true meditation. But sadly, when most of today's world meditation, they think of Eastern religions with their legs crossed and, thinking of just meditate and being in meditation. But one thing that they do that we need to consider with our meditation is they review pictures in their mind. They want you to relax, and they tell you to use visuals like there's a warm breeze, and your eyes are closed, and you feel the warmth coming over your body, and you smell the ocean. See, these are all images that your senses can connect to because most of us have experienced those things. Just like, say, imagine how cold it was this morning. Oh, yeah, I don't have to imagine it. I lived that. That's why we all have our coats on. Okay, putting you in those to meditate on some of those things, those kind of images to bring them into something. See, what are they doing? They're picturing in their mind, they're playing it out. They want to meditate on them so it brings a peace. See, it relaxes them, and that's why people gravitate towards that. So how do I do that in the Bible? How do I meditate like that? I meditate that when I read the scene possibly, and I bring it to life when I visualize maybe that it was I who was there at the scene when Jesus did something so extraordinary. How would I react on seeing this? To put it to new life, not just words off of a page. That's why the word is very powerful, as we mentioned in class today. Sharper than any two-edged sword, as the Bible describes. And it's so powerful that the word that's used is what we use as dynamite. I mean, that is powerful. That is a powerful word. So maybe it was I who was on the scene when Jesus or something was done. How would I feel then? What was happening to the very first time? How did it happen to the rest of the audience? How did they feel? I can meditate on that. We can bring up sights and sounds and meditate on all kinds of things. Like when I say the word 9/11, and I want you to meditate on 9/11, what do you bring up? All those images, those horrendous things. We even hate September to come rolling around because we know we'll have to go sit through that again. I don't want September 11th, but see, it's reminders of those sights and sounds that we may not remember, but it's here to meditate on those things. And I'm not trying to say use 9/11 as it, but you can see how it does and how we react when we bring up all of those to our nature, to those images that we can meditate and make the Bible come alive. So I said, boy, I really like that because it made the Bible come alive. To meditate fills in the black and white with true color. I'm kind of in a dying art. Most of you know that, with my radio background that I enjoy, we're a medium that has to paint pictures because you can't see us. And that's why I say, boy, you don't look like anything like you sound. And I don't know how to take that because I don't know what you're imaging. You don't look anything like you sound. Okay, well, I don't know. I can take that one. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, I don't know. But here's the thing is, we're in people's lives, and whether it be for an advertisement, and we paint the pictures in your mind for you to respond. The best way, and probably the best way that I still enjoy today, is in the broadcast booth for a sporting event with a play-by-play. Now, what you have a play-by-play guy, and then you have the color guy. That's what the analyst next to you is supposed to do. Because when you're not there at the stadium, and someone's painting a picture, they tell you about the field, they tell you about the weather, you're trying to visualize that. And the biggest compliment anybody has ever given to me is this: you know what? I was almost like right there. And that touches me so much because that's my point. You weren't there, but it was just like you were because you got the sights and the sounds and you heard a little bit of that and you painted the picture. Now, the color guy is black and white. I do is, okay, the ball was taken here. It goes X amount of yards. He passes for X amount of yards. Okay, you get the visual of that. But the color guy adds in stuff that he gets to bring that he saw that the play doesn't explain. Well, this is the reason why this happened. It was a double team, or the guy slipped and fell, and then he was able to make a one-handed grab and see one-handed grab. Okay, I kind of visualize. I can see a one-handed grab just outside his fingertips and drew that in. It was remarkable. You see that? Now, see, that's all part of what this adds to it. Now, in the Bible, it would be like if I could tell you that with knowledge that we know, just knowing that and bring it to life, is like maybe David and Goliath. No, that's black and white. David and Goliath is a black and white. We understand it's big versus little. But when it paints a little bit picture, if I was to tell you that David was about 5 feet something, which is a little bit on the shorter end, and Goliath, according to those who've, with the cubits put it together, was 9 feet and a couple of inches. Now, we know a basketball goal is 10 feet. If you can imagine Goliath just standing just a few inches underneath the rim, standing. Now, of course, he could block every shot because his withspan of hands could block everything that was coming that way. Now, most of you have been on a basketball court. Most of you know what a 10-foot goal is. Now, that's how big Goliath is. Now, see what that is? That brings, wow, that was a large enemy to David. And he was 5 foot. Well, I'm 5'4", or I'm 5 foot something. I'm kind of on the shorter side, and I can visualize that. Helps you meditate maybe to grab the story just a little bit better. Whatever can help us in that fact to help us along. Would it mean a bit more? That we can see it? We can maybe compare to it? That's why none of these people were flawless people, because if they were all perfect, we couldn't relate to them, and we just close up the book and say, I could never be like that. But we see the failures of Peter, and we see the failures of Paul, and we see them fall, and they get back up, and you say, you know what? I see me. David in the Old Testament, maybe there's a chapter or two that he'd like for us to ignore, but we get to see that real pain. It means more. It can breathe new life in a black and white story. So when I meditate, I consider a lot of things, and it opens my mind, and I may appreciate more. I may then grow. It's to why no surprise that Paul gives us this in those to Philippi in Philippians 4, 8 through 9. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, right, pure, lovely, good repute, any excellence, anything worthy of praise. Your version may say meditate. Oh, there's that word. Dwell on these things, the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Practice, well, two words we use, meditate, just hear all about that knowledge. Practice these things, and conjunction, what will happen if I practice these things? The God of peace will be with you. Because when we do think on these things, what will happen? What do you think the world would be like if all we dwelled on was these listed here in Philippians 4? It'd be utopia. Well, that's just not real, because there's a lot of negative in the world, and you're right. But what do we tend to dwell on more? What do we tend to bring out more in conversation? Exactly. What would we accomplish? What could the world accomplish? And guess what? It can start with me. If I'm dwelling on just all of those things, because I meditate on those things, it is, you are what you eat. You are what you read. What goes in is going to be a product of what goes out, because it's on your heart. And if we fill it with everything else, which we can, guess what's going to come out? You're only a product of that environment that you only surround yourselves in. Sometimes we dwell on so much that doesn't matter. And we beat the dead horse. Even we say, okay, I've heard it. I understand. No more. No, I got to get one more time. And we dwell on those things. We meditate on those things. And we sit and we stew. We're like a crock pot simmering in our own juices of bitterness, which we ought not to be. But it's so much easier to dwell on those things and just keep meditating on that, when Paul says don't. If you want the God of peace to be with you, and we all want him there, and we dwell on the setbacks and we dwell on the heartaches, and I know that those are very real, but we don't have to dwell on those. You ever hear the old expression, don't cry over spilt milk? What do? Well, we want to gather up every one of those drops of that milk and put it back in that glass and make it all the way it was. It's not going to happen. Your mother told you the best wisdom ever. Don't cry over it. Let's just clean it up and move on. I'm a forward thinker. I've always tried to do that whatever catastrophe is behind us, okay, I understand all that and I respect all that, but going forward, now what? Going forward, what are we going to do? And that's what Paul is trying to encourage us as well. Not to dwell on these things, but instead be dwelled in things that are true all day long. What will happen? What would my life look like if I just thought on things that were honorable? No, but that's not really juicy. I don't like to get on the phone and talk about great things that are honorable. That's why we always give compliments in the news. Say, finally, they did a great news story that was wonderful. Some of the best stories that have been on Facebook is about some autistic basketball player that comes in off the team and scores these wonderful points, and a tear comes to my eye. I'm not a very tearful person. Those things. Think of those wonderful things of how mankind can treat each other and be right and pure, instead of what else we can fill our minds with. Instead of what's lovely and of good report. Really? That's really good news. I love that. I'm not saying that you can't report some of those bad things in life and ask for prayers. I understand that. That's what we're here for. What I'm talking about is not dwelling and meditating it over and over and over again. It says, cast your cares upon me because I care for you. You don't have to carry that, and you don't have to carry it alone. Because guess what? You're not the strength in this. That's what we all have to realize. Oh yeah, you're right. I'm going to be humble to the point that it's not within me. Anything worthy of praise, and then what we put in comes out. And what he concludes within this last verse, the things that you have learned, what we've learned, and received and heard, passed down through these thousands of years, and then seen in Paul as a true illustration, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. That's when we get God's peace being with us. Not just by knowing all of this, but what we practice. You see, I picked that specifically with the word act being higher than anything else in practice. We've all learned we can go out and live it. The world plays this out so well in everything it does, and we don't really see it. It's the same for athletes who practice something all throughout the week, so what? They can carry it out in a game. if they practice. But if you took a show of hands of how many kids actually want to show up for practice and want to go to practice, I don't want to practice. Practice is boring. Practicing is tough. Practicing is hard work. Yeah, you're right. But the body can only respond of what it knows because it's practiced it over and over. The Larry Birds and the Magic Johnsons that we grew up with, you look at how they practiced after practice. Now that goes beyond because they were the best of the best. And it wasn't because of by accident or God-given talent. Larry Bird never really saw himself that way, but he was ate up with the fact that if Magic Johnson shot 200 shots after practice, he was going to do 400. That information was never given to him. He was just compelled in that driving force within himself of competitiveness. All of what they've practiced in reality, because most of us don't want to practice, and think in spiritual matters that we'll just show up and turn on the lights on when the game is out. I know there's some coaches still here right now. That would never work. You couldn't just get a bunch of people that were willing and had all this knowledge about what to do and learned it in a book and never practiced it out, and then game time you're going to be successful at something. It would be a disaster. And it's not encouraged, and nor is it accepted. I know of one team in this community alone. You miss 2 practices and you're off the team. I mean, unexcused practice. I'm not talking about being sick or anything. I mean, if you just choose willfully to not be a part of the program, then guess what? You're not a part of the program. Some people may think that's harsh. Well, that's just too much. That's just asking too much. But they strive for excellence in that capacity, in that world. It doesn't happen that very well when we don't practice. How could the body react to something it never went over and practiced? And that's why Paul uses the analogy of they discipline their body in all aspects to win a wreath. But we do this. I want you to be in the race to win an imperishable wreath. It's kind of like what some of our college or high school students would be today. It'd be like them wanting to take a test without ever studying. I bet you Allison can relate to this with all these months of studying. Allison, you think that you would ever be a success if you never studied any of that? No, she's shaking her head no. I don't think she would have passed anything because it's that tough. But we think that, well, let me just take the easy way route. I mean, I don't really want to know this. I kind of want to know about it. Just kind of go through it. Can't work that way. It doesn't even work in life. And yet we want it to work in the spiritual matters, the most important matters of life. And not this. God should just provide all what I need without me doing anything. Doesn't work in anything else, and it won't work here if we don't apply what we hear. But the choice is ours. The choice is yours and mine. What will you choose? Joshua said it long ago. I didn't have to. Choose this day whom you may serve. Gives a great lesson. He says, you know what? I've already seen all this. You can go serve all those gods of the past and get the calamity that comes with it, or you can serve the one true God. What will your choice be? But you know what? For me and my household, me and my family, we've already made that choice. We will choose to serve the Lord. If we can be of any help to you, we'd offer this as an invitation that we can pray with you and for you. Maybe you're struggling with some of the things that we talked about. Maybe you've never obeyed the gospel and would like to have an opportunity given to you, and that is ready at this moment. Whatever your desire is, if you have a need, if you'll come now as we stand and as we sing.